Appalachia horror stories, echoes of the Soul Eater. Mist draped the Blue Ridge like a burial shroud, flowing between peaks that rose sharp and silent against a pre-dawn sky. Travelers who pass through at speed imagine the mountains sleep. Locals know better. They know the hills murmur after dark, that the forest floor hums with an unseen appetite, that loneliness here is not merely felt, it is fed upon. For centuries, Cherokee elders whispered of a presence that devours memories, sanity, and finally the flesh itself. Loggers vanished, their axes left upright in half-felled trunks. Modern hikers traced bright blazes down into hollows and never traced them back out. Search teams combed ravines that seemed to fold closed behind boot prints. Those who survived spoke of whispers pitched just below hearing, of shadows that wore their dead friends' faces like stolen masks. Carly Savannah was the latest name spoken in low voices at roadside diners lit by flickering neon. Her rescue, alone, wild-eyed, frost-cold in April, should have been a miracle. Instead, it became the black-eyed pearl at the center of a grim necklace of disappearances stretching back farther than county records run. This story, retold here in full, is not simply Carly's tragedy. It is the mountain's testimony, an echo carried on pine resin wind, a confession scratched into shale by fingernails gone blue. 8 chapters trace one tight spiral into the dark, and each step down is lit only by the matchstick flares of human fear. Read on, but do not expect daylight to follow you when the pages close. Some lights, once taken, never fully return. Chapter 1. The Lure of Forgotten Trails. Carly Savannah's fascination with the mountains began not in a classroom, but in the dust-laden attic of her grandparents' farmhouse. She was 7 when she first unfolded a brittle topographical map, older than the interstate, its edges browned like burnt parchment. Red pencil marks wound across ridges toward a hand-drawn symbol that looked like an eye with fangs. Her grandmother snatched the map away, muttering a prayer in the old tongue and locking the trunk with hands that shook. Carly carried the memory into adulthood the way some children keep an invisible friend, silent, persistent, waiting for the right door to open. By 23, she was the anthropology department's rising star, her honors thesis already rumored to outshine graduate dissertations. Professors praised her fieldwork, exhaustive, meticulous, fearless. That fearlessness caught Marcus Chen's eye long before her smile did. Marcus, a statistics major whose idea of risk was ordering extra spicy ramen, found himself saying yes to weekend spelunking trips simply to watch Carly's lamp-cut swaths of light through cave velvet. Jennifer Walsh followed because Carly's laughter turned every challenge into an inside joke. David Morrison, who guided whitewater rafters each summer, joined for reasons he could not name, only that Carly's certainty drew him like gravity. April 6, 1987, senior spring break. Carly loaded the Jeep with laminated maps, vacuum-sealed rations, flares, a second-hand military radio, and a dog-eared folder labeled Soul Eater Legends, Greenbrier Ridge. Marcus rolled his eyes at the title, but he printed extra battery packs anyway. Jennifer stuffed a Polaroid into her coat, promising to document every harmless shadow. David tossed an old compass onto the dash next to cassette tapes of Motley Crue and Kate Bush. They joked that genre collision would keep bears away. Highway asphalt gave way to gravel, gravel to rutted dirt, dirt finally to a Forest Service gate chained but half rotted. The mountains smelled of thawing spruce sap and something subtler, like iron turned to vapor. Jennifer pretended not to notice. David clicked the padlock open with a grin that faltered as the gate groaned aside on hinges orange with rust. Their first camp lay beside a creek so clear it seemed to carry liquid glass. Marcus set his camera on a tripod to capture sunset, while Carly scouted game trails, scribbling GPS coordinates. That night the 4 friends roasted marshmallows and traded ghost stories under Orion's ascent. The air tasted of wood smoke and budding promise. No one spoke of the map in Carly's pack, the one marked with the fang-eyed sigil. No one wondered why the creek ran quieter after midnight, or why the fire occasionally flicked sideways, though no wind stirred. At dawn, Carly rose early, following fresh deer prints that dead-ended at a stone cliff no taller than a man. Moss covered the face, except for a clean patch shaped exactly like a doorframe. When her fingers brushed the stone, the chill sank bone deep, and for a heartbeat she heard water rushing somewhere far beneath, though the creek ran in the opposite direction. She said nothing when she returned. She only noted the coordinates in red pencil. They hiked higher, past blowdowns tangled like giant ribs, past abandoned logging spurs furred with saplings. Twice Marcus adjusted the compass, frowning. Magnetic interference, he reasoned. Jennifer photographed lichen patterns that resembled runes, promising to compare with Norse carvings for fun. David whistled to keep pace, but each note fell flat, the sound swallowed in damp hush. At their second campsite, the trees crowded close, branches splicing the sky into ragged hexagons. Night came quick as a blade. Carly read aloud from century-old ranger logs. Entries scratched out mid-sentence, margins spotted with what looked like dried tears. David laughed it off, until he caught his own reflection in the pot lid and thought, for an instant, that his eyes were rimmed in black that wasn't soot. Sleep moved through their tents in uneasy waves. Somewhere past 3 a.m., a distant crack echoed, wood splitting under weight or jointed bone. Marcus snapped awake to silence so absolute it rang. He called David's name. The forest burped back only his own urgency. 15 feet away, David's tent sagged, empty, zipper still closed. Steam curled from the abandoned sleeping bag, as if the occupant had evaporated. Jennifer insisted it had to be a prank, a midnight river run. She and Marcus circled outward, flashlights blunting against dark so thick it felt granular. Carly remained motionless, kneeling by the fire pit, one hand hovering above coals gone cold hours too soon. In the ash, she traced a symbol with her fingertip, a circle within a circle, bisected by jagged lines like a jaw full of mismatched teeth. When dawn crawled in, the map no longer matched the terrain. Marcus's careful marker ribbons fluttered from branches that shouldn't have existed. The valley floor tilted at a slant absent the day before. Jennifer's Polaroid clicked, but spat out only blanks, images developing to uniform grey. David remained gone as if memory, not flesh, had conjured him. Chapter 2. Hunger behind the bark. Grief drowned in adrenaline. Marcus demanded a rational search grid, but the forest seemed to rearrange each compass reading, each pace count. Creeks curved where no creek should flow, ridges folded back on themselves like accordion pleats. Carly marked anomalies in her notebook until the pages trembled in her hands. With every step she felt invisible threads tugging them deeper, weaving their fates to the mountain's rootwork. That night they forewent a fire, fearful of advertising their location to whatever studied them. Cold seeped into marrow despite balmy spring forecasts. Marcus's teeth chattered a metronome of dread. Jennifer recited medical mnemonics under her breath to keep panic at bay. Carly stared at the swath of sky framed by conifer silhouettes, muttering Cherokee phrases she had memorized for an exam. Invocations for safe passage, words the college textbook assured her were mere cultural artifacts. The whispers began near midnight, soft as breathing against tent canvas, syllables shaping names with intimate precision. Carly. Hush. Marcus. A hush that suggested doors opening in distant hallways. Jennifer clamped a hand over her ears. Marcus lunged out, brandishing a penlight. The beam carved a tunnel through darkness, illuminating nothing but swirling pollen. Yet the voices persisted, close enough that condensation should have fogged the tent walls. Sudden stillness. Then, A thud against the ground outside, like a wet sack dropped. Marcus unzipped the tent to a flicker of starlight and the stink of spoiled meat. A trail of wet footprints led away, too wide for David's boots, toes splayed as if joints were loose. The prince reached a tree trunk 20 yards off and simply climbed up the bark until vanishing at head height, where gouges scored the wood like claw marks. Jennifer retreated, rocking, palms over eyes. She whispered that David's laugh kept looping in her head, playing backward, syllables sluicing down a drain. Carly wrapped her friend in a foil blanket, realizing Jennifer's skin felt refrigerated. Marcus scrawled numbers on his arm. Times, directions, any data he could anchor himself to. The ink bled in mist until the digits blurred. Morning broke pallid. The sun looked sickly, a dime behind gauze. They chose a descent route, any route, west-southwest toward what Marcus insisted must be County Road 18. 3 hours later, the altimeter claimed they had climbed another 200 feet instead. At noon, they found a clearing containing a massive hickory whose bark spiraled in patterns reminiscent of fossilized hurricanes. Symbols scarred the trunk, interlinked circles, talon shapes, eye motifs lined up spine straight. Carly's knees gave. She had seen this exact tree in a dream she never remembered having until now. Jennifer drifted forward, as though reeled by invisible line. Marcus caught her wrist. Her pulse fluttered like trapped moth wings. She stared at the glyphs, pupils dilated, lips mouthing silent rhythm. Carly recognized syncopation, elder Cherokee funeral cadence. She stepped between Jennifer and the trunk, shouting words she barely understood, commands to dispel dark watchers, pleas for sunlit roads. Wind gusted, carrying whimpers that slithered beneath every audible frequency. The forest exhaled rot. Moss blackened. Marcus yanked both women away, but his boots slipped on soil suddenly slick. He landed hard. The ground underneath pulsed like a heartbeat, softening to mud that released sour methane. When he scrambled up, his pant leg bore oily smears smelling faintly of blood. They ran, each branch a skeletal arm grabbing, each root a tripwire. At last, fatigue collapsed them beside a trickle of water. Jennifer knelt to drink, but the reflection rippling back held eyes black as volcanic glass. She gasped and pitched backward. Marcus cupped water in trembling hands. The surface showed only trees. Carly stared until ripples stilled. Her reflection smiled, though her mouth was slack. Night loomed again. Fire was necessary now. Cold had them shuddering even in afternoon. Marcus built a small blaze, shielding flame from wandering eyes. Light danced across trunks, revealing overlapping bark scars like script too rapid to read. Smoke curled upward into a windless sky, yet soon bent sideways as though inhaled by something squatting among branches. Jennifer jerked awake at dusk, eyes unfocused. She rose, moving past Carly before protest formed. Marcus lunged but caught only empty air. Jennifer stepped through flame without wince. Embers hissed on her bare soles. She walked into the gloom, strands of hair lifting as though submerged. Carly chased, shouting pleas and curse-wrapped prayers. Marcus followed the echoing cracks of dried leaves until they ended in hush. Ahead, moonlight silvered the same hickory though they had trekked miles in opposite direction. Jennifer stood before it, hands pressed to glyphs. Carly's heart stammered. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with her friend's breath. A wind tunnel roared in Carly's skull, though the leaves were still. Jennifer turned, and Carly screamed. Pupils gone, only polished obsidian filling sockets, skin bleak as candle wax. Sound bulged, an impossible chord of many voices stacked, pronouncing a name older than language. Air folded. Jennifer vanished, leaving only a curl of steam and the aftertaste of ozone. The hickory's bark drank light until darkness reigned. Marcus dragged Carly away as she convulsed, shrieking Jennifer's name until her throat shredded. When they reached camp, the fire lay smothered beneath undisturbed ash. 2 backpacks rested in the exact center, straps aligned north-south. Everything else, tents, food, radio, had disappeared as though excised with surgical precision. Marcus's notebooks were stacked neatly, pages blank. Chapter 3. Fever in the Hollow. Marcus and Carly stumbled downslope until their knees buckled in a fern-choked depression no larger than a backyard pool. The trees crowded so tightly overhead that evening gloom already pooled like ink, even though the sun still hovered somewhere beyond the ridge. They could go no farther. The ground beneath the ferns felt springy, oddly warm despite the clammy air. Only when Marcus pressed his hand through the fronds did he discover a lattice of interwoven branches. A crude roof laid across a pit. Beneath the lattice, void yawned. A rancid exhalation rose from the opening, decay layered with the sour sweetness of river mud. Carly gagged but forced herself to peer between the branches. 20 feet below, she glimpsed the glisten of something pale. Bones. Everywhere. Long bones picked clean, splayed like wind-strewn petals around a single stone altar, dark with fungal growth. The altar's surface bore the same concentric jaw glyphs etched into the hickory bark. Worse, half-mummified scraps of nylon and canvas clung to one corner, a shred of the red tent David had carried strapped beneath his pack. Marcus backed away too quickly, heels slicing through the lattice. A branch snapped and he plunged one leg to the knee, skin scraping bark until blood streaked his shin. Carly hauled him clear, heartbeat roaring. They did not speak. One unsteady breath after another they took in the clearing's geometry. The hollow formed a perfect circle. No saplings grew within. Even moss recoiled, leaving raw earth embossed with faint spirals that seemed to radiate from the pit like ripples in frozen water. At dusk, a low vibration seeped through the soil, rattling the half-buried stones. The ferns shivered. Marcus whispered that tremors were common near abandoned mines. Carly shook her head. They were at least 20 miles from the nearest shaft. Another shudder rippled outward. The bones below clinked softly, rearranging themselves into patterns she could not name. Her breath misted though warm air still clung to the hollow. She tasted copper on her tongue and realized her nose had begun to bleed. When full night fell, the forest ignited with blue-green motes, will-o'-wisps swirling overhead like a disturbed hive. Carly felt the same inexorable pull she'd seen capture Jennifer, a yawning invitation in the glow. Marcus grabbed her elbow, but his grip felt paper-thin. Whisper voices drifted between the motes, coaxing, no, instructing them to descend. The lattice creaked. Something below shuffled, vertebrae clicking like worry beads. A shape unfurled in the pit's darkness. First the arc of a shoulder, then the suggestion of a head. It rose one vertebra at a time, impossibly tall, limbs jointless and fluid, until its crown nearly brushed the lattice. Moonlight slid across it, revealing skin translucent as wet parchment stretched over shapes that might have been human faces pressing out from within. Carly choked on a scream. Marcus swore, yanked her backward, and flung a flare into the hollow. The magnesium bloom painted the creature's torso in brutal white. No longer translucent, but crowded with embedded eyes blinking in asynchronous horror. Several were green, flecked with hazel. David's. One larger, amber-brown, stared accusingly. Jennifer's. The thing recoiled, hissing like boiling water. Flame reflected in each eye until the flare fizzled, leaving sulfur stink and a darkness so thick it vibrated. They ran, not toward safety, only away. Night roots hooked their ankles, branches whipped their faces, but terror lent speed. Carly's lungs burned icily. Every breath felt colder than the last. Behind them rose a howl, multi-part and dissonant, as though dozens of throats voiced the same note out of sync. It swelled, then halted as abruptly as a dropped blade. Silence reclaimed the ridge, heavier than sound. When dawn bled pale across the peaks, they found themselves above a gorge Carly did not recall climbing. Far below, mist brewed over a river that did not appear on any map. Marcus dropped to his knees, calculus of disbelief finally beating out adrenaline. Carly's temperature had fallen further. Skin clammy, lips faintly blue despite the rising sun. She tried to remember Cherokee counter-rituals, but the syllables unraveled in her mind like twine soaked in acid. She was forgetting things. Basic things, her father's middle name, the smell of her dorm hallway. How many days had passed since they left the jeep? Memory drained as though tapped by leeches. She feared that if she slept, even for a moment, she might wake with no name at all. They followed the ridgeline south, hoping elevation would grant a glimpse of human civilization. Instead, they discovered cairns, stone stacks every 100 yards, each topped with a shard of mirror angled skyward. Marcus knocked one aside. The crumble exposed a cavity where a Polaroid curled, waterlogged and leached of color, save for 4 ghost-pale silhouettes standing amid trees. The air ahead shimmered with heatless mirages, David waving, Jennifer laughing, Marcus's own reflection 30 paces ahead, though he walked beside Carly. Each illusion flickered out when approached, leaving only foxfire-bright fungus etched into trunks where faces had hovered. The mountain was learning, testing baits, refining them. Carly's journal, now little more than damp pulp, still contained one legible note. If the map changes, draw a new compass. She tore out the page and folded it around the compass housing, forcing the needle to lock against the glass. The metal groaned. Then the magnet reversed polarity with a muted snap. The needle steadied, pointing neither north nor south, but toward the rising river mist. Marcus cursed. Carly only nodded. Whatever logic ruled these woods, they would have to break it from within. They descended switchbacks so steep that stones tumbled and clattered into darkness. Halfway down, a sickly scent of lilies mingled with rot. Marcus muttered fractal statistics under his breath to drown the whispers threading through the lily perfume. "We're almost home, buddy." The voice was David's, gutted of warmth. At the gorge floor they found a chapel, wooden, warped, its steeple canted like a snapped neck. Ivy stitched the joints of every board. An iron bell hung in the belfry, green with corrosion but intact. Marcus checked the door. It swung inward on soundless hinges. Inside, pews lay overturned as though by stampede. Hymnals turned to mulch, yet a single candle stub burned on the altar, flame steady, neither consuming wax nor emitting heat. Beneath it lay another Polaroid. Carly and Marcus standing by the lattice pit, eyes black voids, grins carved too wide. In the corner of the frame, a thin grey arm reached toward them. Carly pocketed the photograph, voice hollow as wind when she suggested ringing the bell. Sound travels, she reasoned. Rescuers might hear. Marcus nodded, climbed the narrow staircase, and seized the rope. He paused. Every instinct screamed, "Don't." Then, thinking of David, Jennifer, and the bone pit, he yanked. The clang split the gorge open. Echoes ricocheted off cliffs, shivering dust from rafters. The candle's flame stretched upward, thinning into a filament that pierced the ceiling, then burned out. Silence did not return. Instead came an answering toll somewhere deeper in the woods, duller, slower, like a bell dragged across gravel. The chapel door slammed itself shut. Chapter 4. Concordance of the Lost. Carly hurled herself against the door. It refused even to rattle. Marcus descended white-knuckled. His hands smelled of ozone, his eyes bloodshot spiderwebs. A muffled chorus seeped through the walls. Familiar voices chanting in breathy harmony, too distant to decipher yet close enough to feel on skin. Boards flexed as if something massive circled the chapel exterior, timber groaning under invisible weight. Moonbeams sliced through broken stained glass, scattering motes that formed shapes mid-air, negative photographs drifting like ash. Each captured moments of the foursome's past. Move-in day at the dorms, Carly asleep on a library table. David cannonballing into a quarry lake. With every heartbeat the images curled inward, cohorts of memory devoured by heatless flame, until nothing remained but black confetti fluttering to floorboards. A pulse reverberated beneath their feet, and a rhythmic heartbeat deep as tectonic grind. Pews rattled in sequence, a wave barreling toward the altar. Candlebrass split down the middle, molten wax spraying like bile. The pulse resolved into drumbeats, 3 at a time, pause, 3 again. Morse, Marcus-mouthed letters, SOS. Carly blinked. The pattern shifted. 5 beats, pause, 2, 3. Coordinates perhaps, or countdown. The air thickened to gel. Each inhale fought suction, lungs dragging against unseen current. Carly's ears popped. Blood trickled from one. Marcus gripped her shoulder, his touch static charged. He shouted, but no sound emerged. The chapel's interior skewed, angle of walls bleeding into impossible perspective like a photograph curling in heat. Window glass liquefied, forming slow tears down leaded seams. Shapes pressed against exterior planks, stretching wood grain into facial impressions. Lips parted, splinters fell. A single digit, pale, jointless, wormed through a knothole, tapping in the same triplet rhythms. Carly's knees buckled. She fumbled for her pack, found the flare gun slick with moisture, loaded a red star. When the digit split lengthwise to birth a second finger, she fired into the roof. Light exploded, reflecting off warped glass shards as miniature suns. The flare ricocheted, igniting hymnals. Firestorm roared upward, hungry for pitch-soaked timber. Screams rent the vacuum, throats outside and inside, overlapping. The door burst inward, night wind howled through, scattering flame. For one heartbeat the way was clear. They bolted into moonlit graveyard. Headstones leaned like drunken sentries, dates spanning 3 centuries yet sharing one epitaph. Taken into the shadow. Fog coiled ankle-high, cool and pleasantly scented like autumn loam, then tightened around calves with eel-slick grip. Carly hacked at the mist with her machete. It parted, wept grey beads, rejoined. Marcus plowed ahead, dragging her up a slope lined by cairns hung with mirror shards. Each shard reflected their flight at a fraction delay, 5 seconds behind, so Carly watched herself stumble moments before it happened. At the hill crest stood a gate of antlers lashed with braided vine. Beyond, forest opened to a glade glowing aquamarine even devoid of moon. In its center sat a pond black as engine oil. Surface perfectly still, sky full of stars though the canopy should have hidden them. Marcus hesitated, but Carly pressed forward, instincts whispering that stasis equaled death. As they passed the antler arch, an electric tingle rippled across skin, threshold crossed. The whispers ceased. The night fell dead. They stood at pond's edge, reflections wavering. Carly's mirrored self lacked eyes entirely. She resisted urge to touch water. Marcus dropped to one knee, exhausted, tears streaking smoke-sooted cheeks. His reflection knelt too. But behind him, 2 other silhouettes emerged. Jennifer, David. They placed hands on Marcus's shoulders, hands that phantom cold sprouted gooseflesh on his actual skin. Carly screamed for him to move. Marcus stared, mesmerized. His reflection's face softened into relief. Then its mouth warped into a grin too wide, splitting cheeks ear to ear. Water erupted upward, arms liquefying into ropes that lashed Marcus's wrists. Carly lunged, hacking with machete. Steel met water yet struck taut resistance. Sparks flew. She severed one tendril, then another, yanking him free. They toppled backward through moss. The pond boiled, birthing a figure 7 feet tall, cloaked in membranes like coal. It strode onto shore, pond skin shedding to reveal musculature woven of shadow filaments. Embedded within chest flickered dozens of eyes, some cloudy with age, some bright and new. It knelt, jaws opening downward like unfolding fan, revealing a night beyond night. Whisper voices poured from its maw, articulating 3 words in perfect chorus: "Bring her home." It extended an arm. From palm dangled Jennifer's pendant, the one bearing both their sorority letters, slick with pond water. Marcus sobbed. Carly drew the flare gun again, last round, green star, and fired into the creature's gaping throat. Flame burst internal, light spilling from eye sockets. It howled, limbs reaching miles long and inches thin before collapsing into itself like burnt paper. The pond hissed, steam swirling shapes of running figures that vanished on the wind. Above, sky glowed pre-dawn, though hours remained till sunrise. Carly checked the compass. Needle spun madly. She tossed it into the pond. It sank without ripple. They trekked north, guided by nothing but the faint scent of wood smoke. Each step felt less solid, as though gravity faltered. Carly feared they were thinning, becoming as unreal as the illusions chasing them. When Marcus stumbled and could not rise, she built a fire of deadfall. Flames burned cold blue. He drifted into fevered sleep, skin ice slick, pulse threadbare. Near dawn, a horned silhouette watched from tree line, buck-like antlers, man-tall. Carly raised the machete. The figure lifted one skeletal hand, gesturing deeper into forest. Behind it, columns of dawn light seemed to slam earthward, carving paths of brilliance. Carly realized they formed a circle, a ring of sunrise sheathed in mist. The figure stepped aside. Marcus woke lucid, whispering one word Carly did not know, a Cherokee syllable meaning concordance, the place where worlds overlap. He claimed he'd heard Jennifer speak it in dream. With no other guide, they followed the antlered sentinel into that ring. The air inside buzzed like beehive sonar. Colors inverted, leaves flashed negative white sky charcoal. Ahead, a cabin emerged, Ezekiel's, though miles should separate them. Smoke curled from chimney, smell of chicory coffee drifting comforting and wrong. Carly pushed the door, hinges shrieked but opened. Inside, Ezekiel sat at table, Bible open. He looked older, eyes ringed purple. When he spoke, his voice overlapped itself, as though 2 Ezekiels read lines in imperfect sync. "I prayed you home, child," both voices said. On the table lay 3 items: Marcus's torn notebook, Jennifer's pendant, David's compass, none of which Carly had carried. Behind Ezekiel stood a window showing night sky, though outside, dawn light flooded. In that sky floated 3 black stars where no constellations lay. Carly realized the cabin was not sanctuary, but fulcrum, an axis the Soul Eater used to pivot prey between realms. She gripped Marcus's hand. They would not consent to be turned. Ezekiel's form flickered, duplicate frames slipping. Antlers sprouted from scalp as skin blistered into bark. Cabin walls buckled outward, pine boards elongating into root clusters. Marcus screamed as floorboards liquefied to tar, sucking at boots. Carly hurled the pendant into tar. It hissed, emitting Jennifer's laugh pitched backward. She smashed the Bible lamp, spilling oil aflame. The walls caught, belching sap smoke. Ezekiel, no longer Ezekiel, reached for them. Carly slashed the air, blade bit antler, spraying ichor glowing ember gold. The creature reeled, stumbling through doorway into dawn ring. Sun columns flared, searing its bark skin to ash. Carly dragged Marcus across threshold. Ring light winked out. They stood alone in ordinary morning, cabin reduced to scorched foundation stones. The compass of birdsong returned. For first time in days, she felt warm. But behind them, in shadow of a single charred beam, 3 silhouettes stood shoulder to shoulder, watching. Chapter 5. The name carved in bone. Light broke through the treetops in thin blades that felt too fragile to carry warmth. Marcus sat against a half-charred beam, shivering in shock while Carly scavenged the blackened ruins of the cabin. Charcoal crumbled under her fingers, but in the ash she found symbols etched into the surviving hearthstone, glyphs she recognized from her grandmother's brittle map. They formed a ring around one word chiseled in English letters, so jagged they looked bitten into the rock. Concordance. Carly felt a tremor of memory, a childhood fever dream of antlers tapping her window pane, of voices coaxing her into moonlit fields. She realized the mountain had been calling her for years, seeding nightmares and curiosities until she would bring new offerings up the ridge. Jennifer had once joked that Carly was a walking magnet for folklore. Maybe the magnetism ran both ways. Marcus roused at last, eyes glazed. He whispered that he had dreamed of Jennifer standing at the foot of an endless stair carved through limestone. Each step down bled light. Each echo of her footsteps repeated 3 times. She spoke only one sentence before vanishing. "Your heart is our doorway." Carly fed him water from Ezekiel's dented canteen and wrapped her jacket around his shoulders. She could feel the mountain watching. Even the breeze felt voyeuristic, dodging her skin like curious fingers. She checked Marcus's leg wound. No infection, but the flesh around the scrapes was mottled with a faint gray veining, as if frostbite mapped his veins despite spring warmth. They could descend the valley in search of rescue, but instinct told her flight would only stretch the chase. Fear is a tether. The more you run, the longer the rope. She chose confrontation. Marcus balked, but weariness dimmed his resistance. He had begun to understand that numbers and coordinates meant nothing here. The rules were ritual, not math, and Carly, oddly, seemed to intuit their grammar. She led them back toward the circle of sun columns that had vanished. The forest corridor they entered was lined by trees whose trunks bore shallow hollows large enough to fit a skull. Something lived in each recess, stones shaped like hearts, cracked hand mirrors, clumps of human hair woven with feathers. Offerings. Carly left a lock of her own hair, cut with her machete edge, hoping to balance scales she couldn't see. The trail descended into a ravine where fog clung knee-deep. The ground here pulsed, breathing almost, and a faint heartbeat rhythm thrummed through roots beneath their boots. In the ravine center, a cairn of white bones rose, capped by a single deer antler whose tines dripped black sap. On the antler's beam, something, had carved Marcus's full name in perfect block letters. Beneath it, a second name waited, Caroline E. Savannah. Marcus coughed, blood flecking his lip. Carly realized the mountain had been writing their fate faster than they could travel. She smashed the bone cairn with a fallen limb, fragments scattering in fog. The heartbeat stuttered, grew frantic, then settled into a thunderous cadence that shook loose bark from trees. A roar, neither wind nor beast, poured down the ravine walls, accompanied by the hiss of sliding scree. The fog thickened, birthing silhouettes that crawled on jointless limbs. They wore root-wrapped skulls for heads, eye sockets glowing faint amber. One dragged Jennifer's pendant along the ground like a lure. Another balanced David's compass on its thorned knuckles. Carly hauled Marcus up the slope. Roots lashed at their ankles, but she hacked with machete, sparks flying. The wood bled cold sap that steamed where it hit sunlit air. Near the ridgetop, a fissure opened, spitting sulfur and gusts of frozen vapor. Carly gambled on instinct again. She hurled the compass into the fissure. The ground convulsed, creatures shrieked, and the canyon walls folded closed like pages slamming shut. When silence returned, the pendant lay at her feet, chain tangled into a knot, shaped like the jaw glyph. She pocketed it, feeling the mountain bristle. Chapter 6. A Map of Other People's Dreams. By sunset, they found a logging road severed by landslide. Canted telephone poles lined its edge, each sprouting nests of dead wires. Carly rummaged through the roadside detritus, rusted oil drums, broken crates, and unearthed a stained billboard half buried in moss. The advertisement, circa 1950, showed a smiling family picnicking under the slogan, "Visit beautiful Greenbrier Ridge." Someone had painted over the faces with tar, replacing eyes with black ovals. On the sign's reverse, she spotted faint pencil marks. A topographic sketch of the ridge network, identical to her grandmother's map, but annotated with dates and initials, hundreds of them, spanning almost a century. She recognized a few from missing persons articles she'd read: DS 1932, LH 1964, EN 1979. The last three entries were fresh charcoal: MC, JW, DM. A space waited beneath them. Marcus tried to scrub their initials, but the charcoal would not smear. Carly overlaid her palm. The marks felt raised, pulsing faintly like insect eggs. She tore the billboard free, snapped it into planks, and scattered them into the ravine. The initials still flickered in her memory, branding iron hot. Exhausted, they built camp in a cutaway sheltered by fallen cedar. Marcus collapsed into troubled sleep. Carly kept watch, but fatigue pulled her under. In dreams, she stood in the sun-column circle again, except the beams were hollow, filled with humming darkness. Jennifer floated within one, lips moving. "The mountain needs a story to swallow," she mouthed. "Write it wrong, and it will write you instead." Carly jolted awake to the creak of leather. A figure sat across the dying fire, a woman in 19th century riding coat, face half hidden by lace veil. The woman held Jennifer's Polaroid in gloved hands. Her voice was dry leaves, stories shape paths. "Yours circles, dear. Straight lines beat circles." Carly demanded to know who she was. The woman lifted her veil. No face beneath, only a knot of roots and small stones where skin should be. She placed a folded map on the coals. The paper did not burn. "Straight line," she repeated, pointing north. Then she evaporated, ember sparks spiraling where she'd been. Carly snatched the map. It depicted a single line from their location to a peak labeled with a glyph instead of a name. At its terminus, the line ended in a crude doorway symbol, two vertical strokes crossed by a single horizontal. Beneath, in Cherokee syllabary, was written Utsanati Unole, breath thief. She woke Marcus. His fever had broken, but his eyes carried an old man's fatigue. She showed the map. He nodded, resigned. Northward lay the highest spine of Greenbrier, a place hikers avoided because erosional knife edges claimed ankles and lives. But the straight line avoided trails entirely, cutting through trackless forest like a stitch closing a wound. As they struck camp, dawn flashed green, not gold. The first sunlight filtered through a sky where clouds curled into spirals mimicking jaw glyphs. Birds were silent, even insects held their breath. Chapter 7. The Threshold of Unwritten Things. The climb stole their breath. Hour by hour the forest thinned, pines replaced by wind-blasted fir, then by naked rock. At tree-line they saw an expanse of shale sloping beneath a limestone overhang shaped grotesquely like a ribcage. The map's line ended here. Within the shadowed alcove yawned a doorway cut into the mountain itself. Ancient, rectangular, its lintel carved with circles devouring smaller circles. No mortar, no tool marks. It looked extruded from darkness. Cold air spilled out, smelling of myrrh and fresh graves. Marcus pressed his palm to the lintel. A tremor shuddered through stone and bone alike. He whispered that he heard David singing inside, a campfire tune, warped minor. Carly felt a tug behind her sternum, as though a fishhook had snagged her aorta. The mountain demanded entry. They stepped inside. Blackness folded around them, absorbing flashlight beams into velvety null. The corridor sloped deeper. Walls crawled with phosphorescent lichen forming glyph chains, stories told in teeth and eyes. Carly translated fragments. When the eater is hungry, the mountain opens its mouth. Ahead, a glow brewed. They emerged into a basalt chamber the size of a cathedral, roof lost in gloom. In the center, a dais of polished obsidian supported a tree, dead yet living, roots encased in glassy stone, branches leafless but weeping translucent sap. Embedded along its trunk were faces, hundreds, frozen in mid-scream, their mouths oozing luminous threads that draped the air like spider silk. At the tree's base lay 3 stone sarcophagi. 2 lids were ajar, empty. The third remained sealed. Carly's knees buckled when she saw the carved names: Jennifer Walsh, David Morrison, and the unopened slab, Marcus Chen. Marcus staggered to the sarcophagus bearing his name. His hand hovered above it, trembling. Carly grabbed him, pleading that the mountain was baiting them. Behind her, sap threads drifted close. Voices whispered temptations. Open the box and wake the dream. Marcus sobbed that he could feel Jennifer inside the tree, could feel her heartbeat merged with sap. Carly understood. The faces on the bark were still alive, souls leached slowly until only eyes remained. She had a machete, a flare gun, dwindling courage. She chose destruction. With raw screams she hacked at the trunk. Steel rang on stone flesh. Sap splattered fluorescent on her arms, burning cold. Faces contorted. Some mouthed thank yous, others shrieked in anger. The chamber trembled. Marcus tore roots with bare hands, yanking free a tangle that pulsed with greenish light. Cracks chevroned across the obsidian dais. From the darkness above dropped the breath thief, a column of shadow coalescing into humanoid form, antlers curving into infinity. Eyes of every color swirled in its chest. Its mouth unfolded wider than jaws allow, exhaling tendrils that sought Marcus first. Carly fired her last flare point blank. The creature swallowed flame, body glowing furnace red, but still advanced. Carly shoved Marcus aside and slashed a thick root that fed into the sealed sarcophagus. Obsidian shattered, spilling starlight that blasted the chamber. The faces on the tree gasped in unison, sap reversed flow, streams of color hurtling back into sockets. The breath thief howled, a children's choir singing backward, clutching its chest as eyes burst like bubbles. The tree's trunk split, fountaining raw light. The mountain roared as if its heart detonated. Carly felt the world rotate underfoot, gravity lurching sideways. She and Marcus were flung toward the corridor mouth, hurtling upward on a wind hotter than kiln fire, yet ice cold against skin. They erupted into daylight. Behind them the doorway collapsed, slabs grinding together until only bare cliff remained. The sky reverted to honest blue, plain and soft. Wind sighed ordinary pine scents. Carly expected cheers or songbirds, or at least the relief of tears. Instead, there was silence so normal it felt surreal. Marcus lay unconscious but breathing. His eyes, when they opened moments later, were clear brown, no shadow flecks. He whispered that the singing had stopped. Carly helped him down the slope. With each step, the mountain seemed to age backwards into mere geology. Flowers she'd never noticed before bloomed at her feet. Violets, trillium, life-claiming ground left empty by retreating darkness. Chapter 8. What the Mountain Keeps. It took them 3 days to reach a ranger station off a gravel spur. Their story, fragmented, unbelievable, was met with polite disbelief, but search parties still fanned out. They found no cabin ruins, no antler gate, no obsidian chamber. They did find the charred stones of Ezekiel's hearth. The man himself was never located. Hospital tests showed Marcus's blood normal save for trace minerals found in deep earth aquifers. Carly's body temperature returned to baseline. The gray veining along Marcus's leg faded like old bruises. To outside eyes, they were survivors of misadventure, nothing more. But every mirror Carly passed for weeks afterward shimmered with faint after-images. An endless stare of light, Jennifer waiting one landing below, palm outstretched. Marcus admitted hearing David's laugh in static whenever his radio dialed between stations. They never spoke of the sarcophagi aloud, though both dreamed of a third lid ceiling, a name never carved. Months later, Carly returned to her grandmother's attic. The trunk was gone. In its place lay a single antler, sawed clean, dripping black sap onto the floorboards. Tacked to it was a Polaroid of the four friends at the creek on day one, except their eyes were blank white, and a root-woven figure loomed behind them, unseen at the time. Carly burned the attic contents, but smoke drifted downslope toward the Blue Ridge, curling like a beckoning finger. She realized that stories never end, they burrow. The mountain sleeps on maps, waiting for new narrators who crave wonder more than safety. She and Marcus founded a website documenting Appalachian disappearances, facts, names, locations, each story told straight as a compass arrow, refusing the circular lure of myth. They wrote to warn, not to glorify. Yet every visitor who scrolled too far received a glitch. 3 dots blinking, then the screen went black before rebooting with a single glyph on white background, a circle devouring a circle inside. Carly understands now that the mountain still writes, still hungry. But as long as her voice remains honest, maybe the path will stay straight. Maybe the next curious wanderer will read and turn back before the whisper hooks their name. She hopes so. Because some evenings when the house settles and the wind sets pine needles scratching slate roofs, she hears a tolling far away, 3 chimes followed by silence, and she remembers there was a 4th sarcophagus. Empty, she always sleeps with the lights on. You've reached the end of Carly Savannah's story, but the echoes of Greenbrier Ridge still travel the wind. Share this tale with anyone who tempts fate along lonely trails, and let the warning spread wider than the shadow behind the trees. Subscribe for the next descent into true Appalachian dread, because some stories open doors, and once you've listened, the mountains might start whispering your name too.